My name is David, and this is The Big Shut-In. It is Tuesday, May 12th, day 59 since I went into lockdown. And I had a moment tonight where I was sitting on the couch. It was just after the kids went to bed, and finally, and my wife went to bed, and I realized something, that my energy about this whole situation had changed and needed to change, because I realized I had been sort of braced, you know? I'd been in duck and cover position mentally in a lot of ways, where I was saying, okay, this is going to stink, but we're going to do it for a couple weeks, couple months. It'll be over. Just hold my breath and push through and come out on the other side. And I realized today that we're going to be doing this for a long time. Nobody really knows how long, but it could be several more months. It could be a year. We could be doing this next spring. It's possible. And however long that is, we got to figure out how to live in it. I got to figure out how to make a life out of this. That I'm not just hunkered down. I'm actually living one way or another. Because this is a disease of time. This is an event of time that stretches out. And it's a patient kind of a thing. And it seems to be that on every level. We're getting more and more reports of people who have had this disease, and reports about how long it's taken them to actually get over it. It's not like the flu, something that you're sick for a few days, a week, 10 days if it's really bad. And then when you're done, and you're yourself again. There's a lot of reports coming through now about people who have these symptoms that just hang on for a month, for 6 weeks. And it makes perfect sense, because this is a condition of hanging on. This is a time of things hanging on and on and on. Anyway, I talked to my friend Anne today, and Anne lives with her family in Montclair, New Jersey. Her husband, Ignacio, Nacho, to his friends, is a pilot for a major airline. And they had this thing. Nacho had it, was diagnosed with it, and brought it home, and Anne got sick with it, and both her kids got sick with something that looked a lot like it. And I wanted to talk to her because I'd been hearing stories from her about now, more than a month later, that they're just now really starting to maybe feel like themselves. And I was curious to hear their story of what was, by all reports, a mild case. Everyone felt lousy. They lost their sense of taste, did all that weird stuff. But nobody was in the hospital. Nobody was on a ventilator. Nobody was really in danger of losing their lives. But it's hung on. It's been with them for a long time. The way we're all sitting and hanging on for a long time. Anyway, here's Anne. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing remarkably better. I have to say, I was starting to feel like it wasn't going to ever get better. And I think in the last week, I felt like it wasn't anything like where I woke up one day and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I did feel like I had a bigger leap forward over the last 7 days. So where maybe, in the daytime, my head wasn't just constantly going, okay, how are my lungs feeling? And how's my cough doing? And, when you've done this for 5 weeks and it's all kind of progressed to different stages, you kind of keep thinking like, okay, what's the next stage? Like, what does this morph into? So for me, the chest congestion and tightness and burning and feeling like My belly was distended so badly that it was like I felt like I was 9 months pregnant again. All of that came on between like weeks 4 and 5. So for me, it was after all of the illness part and the fevers and everything had happened already. So it was, it just felt like a month into it, you're like, why do I feel worse than, the first 10 days? So I think it was just, I was getting, on top of everything else, I was just getting really sick of being sick. So, and, seeing people when you go for a walk and you see somebody at the other side of the street and they're like, are you feeling better? You're out walking. And it's like, no, but you're passing them from such a distance. You're just like, thumbs up, so it's like, okay. Feels a little bit like you're lying by omission, but no, I think the last week we felt both my husband and I that we turned sort of a corner forward. So, you read and you hope that continues. That's the main thing. So.
Well, let's go back. When, because Nacho had this first, right? And
yes. So
how
he's still working? Yeah. So it was like, we came back actually from Milan. We went there for winter break this year, and that was a very, the benefits of having an airline employee in the family, that we went kind of as a last minute thing. We thought, well, let's just see how the flights look. And I have a good friend there. And so we thought we could some time with her and hang out. So we went there very last minute, right in the middle of February. And we went to Venice and we came back. And by the time we landed here, about a day or two after that was when we heard, oh, Italy has this outbreak. And we thought, well, that's really crazy. Like, we didn't see anything when we were there. We weren't really, we were following the news on our phones, but there was no indication that Italy was any part of that. So we came home, and then there was sort of this like whisper, and we kind of thought, oh, that's strange. How did we, of all the places that we went, that we picked to go to, how did we end up in some place that was this hotbed? Because, up to the early part of February, we were just hearing about China and travel. So anyway, we came back, and my husband Nacho was still working. He had like a bunch of time in that 2-week period right after we landed in February. So he was working pretty solidly for about 2.5 weeks. And he had just like a day or two off, and then he'd go back, and he was flying a lot up and down the East Coast, going to Florida and coming back to New York. And so as this sort of news story and coronavirus was sort of becoming a bigger deal, I think, it was strange, but it was like people were still just, every day was just coming and going, normal routine. He was going in and out. And when he came back from his last trip before he got sick, it was the 21st of March. So he got sick, had a sore throat and didn't feel right. And then within like a day or so had a fever. And he got tested the 25th of March. And that's when he didn't find out that day. Unfortunately, it took about 9 days for us to get results, but we were just so happy that he was even able to procure a test and was able to get swabbed. And, the doctor's office here in New Jersey was very good about that. They felt that because he was an essential worker and he would be going back to work, that he really needed to have he shouldn't be flying until that test was done. So we're happy that he actually got one.
So if he did contract it in Italy, he wasn't symptomatic for a month.
No. And I don't think any of us think that we got it there. I think most likely we got it from one of his flights or the airport or riding the train to the airport. So it was more than likely we were all back home in 3 to 4 weeks with no symptoms. So yeah, his symptoms didn't appear for almost a month after that trip. So I'm pretty sure that, but it just was such a strange, it just kind of put us in the mode, I guess is what I felt, that we came back and all of a sudden it was like, I had people that I barely know here in our new town that were sending me messages like, wow, you guys really got back just in the nick of time. And, aren't you lucky? And it kind of made me feel, because I'd seen photos that we were gone, and it made me feel a little bit like, okay, I guess they're tracking that. Like, am I going to be, quarantined in the dog park? Like, there was no sense of what was to come yet. So I started to feel a little bit weird, and, talking to friends back in Queens and getting a gauge of like, okay, I guess, there was a lot less paranoia in general, I think, at that time, but it started to just kind of creep in like, oh, that is weird. Are we going to get sick? And then after the 2-week period when we had landed and everybody was healthy and we knew about what this could be, then we started to feel a little bit like, okay, well, we've cleared that hurdle, and then let's see what happens next. And obviously it was about 2.5 weeks after that he actually came down with a fever. So we're pretty sure that was just, something he picked up on the road. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of, he would leave his stuff at the door when he came home and he would change clothes and everything. But I don't think we were really, at that point, we weren't really, doing our best to kind of separate him. There was no, we wouldn't quarantine him every time he came home. So.
And how did that sort of develop when he started feeling bad? What was that progression? Was it?
He doesn't get sick often. He's a pretty healthy dude, and when he does get a fever, I do think that it's one of those things that kind of, it usually turns into something bigger. So I was a little concerned the first night that he was running a low fever, and just knowing that wasn't very like him. So I think it was at least a day later he was still running it, still had a really sore throat, which, at the time, I guess I thought of sore throat maybe as a symptom, but I'm not really sure that it really, we were like, well, could it be? Could it not be? And do we just wait this out, or do we, call? And he called, and within just a couple of hours, he had a video conference, and then was told, why don't you come in and get swabbed? And then the waiting game began, and we just sort of, in that time period, we thought, okay, we'll try to separate ourselves a little bit. And within 2 days, I got sick. So it was 2 days after his swabbing. So we didn't know anything about his results yet, but we knew that at that point I was probably already too late to stop the transmission. And my oldest daughter got sick around the same time. We both actually didn't have sore throats, but we had headaches that were just like ear, just from ear to ear, just like split the top of your head open, kind of wrapped around through my eyes. I don't get migraines, so I don't know how that pain feels, but it was just the worst headache, I've ever had. So it was bad. And then the next, I think probably 2 days of that on top of fever. And that's when we called her pediatrician, and he just said, well, you probably all three have COVID. And we were like, that's not what you want to hear. So
after he got the swab, how long did it take to get a result from that?
The swab took 9 days. They initially told us we might have results in 5 days. And that was Ignacio's swab. So the pediatrician at the time, when I called for my oldest daughter, Elisa, he said, you know what, you've already had one person in your family swab. It sounds like you all three have it. I'm not going to bring her in to swab her. I think there's no reason to do that. You're going to have results sooner than what we would find out today. It would basically start the clock over another 7 to 10 days. So we were just waiting, and in that period, you're glad you've been able to test, but it was just so frustrating to not, you're seeing people talking about getting, test results in 24 hours, or some people even getting same day tests, and you just know that they're just not available. The testing availability and also the results, the time frame on getting those results was just,
I've heard of it taking 2 or 3 weeks to get results.
And I think some of that as March crept into April, I think the backlog from what I read online and from, friends, people telling me that they were so backlogged that there were testing sites that were just shipping out samples and just not getting, results for weeks. So we were, after the 9 days, and we'd kind of gone through what we thought was like the biggest part of the illness, we were like, okay, well, we're all still breathing. We're all okay. And now we know he's positive. So we just assumed that, by that time, my youngest daughter had fallen sick. So we were just like, okay, well, we're all getting it out of the way now, and we're just going to wait and see what happens. So.
And I can't think of an elegant way to ask this question, but how sick did you get? Because I've been hearing reports of everything from kind of, I had a bad cold to I was, in the hospital for 5 days hallucinating.
Sore throat, fever. None of us had high fevers. So in that way, we weren't like bedridden for days. I think we were lucky because it was fairly mild. None of us felt good, but we were able to kind of get up and, at least get to the couch and turn on the TV. And we looked, not exactly half dead. So
I mean, but it never got to the point where you had to call an ambulance or anything horrible like that, or
excuse me. My COVID throat is still the last thing that I have after dinner and after meals. Sometimes I have a lot of, I guess, residual effects of coughing so much. I think none of us, thank God, none of us had any real shortness of breath. What I think we all had at some point was just very labored breathing. And I don't know how to describe it except to say it felt, to me personally, it felt like there was like an anvil on my chest. I mean, it felt like to take a deep breath and to push my lungs up and to inflate them just took like a lot of effort and thought. And it wasn't, there were times I would get in bed at night, at least 2 or 3 nights, and I thought, I guess I'll just keep breathing all night long. Like, I feel like my chest is sort of caving in, and it feels like when I would lay down on my side, which is the normal way I sleep, it felt like if you imagine like an accordion or an air, that it felt like you were just pushing all the air out, and it was going to take a lot of effort to like open it and fill it up again. There were just a couple times that I felt a little disoriented, or while somebody was talking, I just felt like I don't really know what they're talking about. Like there were just moments, a quick flash of like, I don't think that was, and not a distracted way, just a real like, I'm not sure I understood that. And, I think hearing from other people now that that's a sign of low oxygen saturation, it's like, oh shit.
I was interested to hear you talking about how this is sort of hung on, and there have been waves and stages and sort of lingering issues. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, about, after the initial kind of, after you started feeling better.
Yeah, so we felt better, and it was like, okay, we're able to take a walk. Okay, let's go, we spent about 2 weeks solid just in the house without really stepping foot outside except the backyard. And then it was like, I think it was right at Easter, it was like, okay, we're going to take a walk, let the dog sniff somebody else's grass and walk around the block. And I felt like, okay, I can do this. And it felt a little like walking through molasses, but in terms of just mobility and how we felt in terms of energy, but we were able to do it, and the kids definitely had higher energy at that point. For me, it was like, you can take a shower and do your hair and makeup and put on, not sweatpants and get up out of the house. And it was like, okay, this is good. This is all good. Like I'm feeling, like more like myself, but there was sort of an inherent part of that the picture you take and post and you show everybody your face and say Happy Easter. And then it's like, oh shit, like I don't feel good. I don't feel like myself, and there were a lot of people like, oh, it's so good to see you. And you look happy and you look like you're back to your old self. And it's like, yeah, I guess. But it's also like every day after that, you're like, oh, okay, I don't feel like I can do, I'm backsliding a little. And then 2 days later, you'd feel a little bit better. And so for us, it was just weeks 3 and 4. And, you were getting to that point where it's like, this is really not going away. And I don't think we really knew what we were supposed to feel like. There was not like a 2-week, 10 days or 2 weeks of the flu where you start to be like, oh yeah, no, I'm better. Like this is clearly my, sinuses are clear and my chest is clear. It was a really gradual change. And so we were both pretty concerned that at some point it was just not right, that we were still feeling so kind of bogged down. So we did talk to the doctor again. She was like, let's get you in, let's have chest x-rays. She gave us a Z-Pack and she gave us an inhaler, albuterol. And those things were like kind of making a difference, but not as much as I thought that they would. When the doctor prescribes and says, you know what, here's what I'm going to do. And you think, yes, they figured out what's going to help me. And then you take it and then you're like, doesn't maybe seem like it's helping as much after day 5 of it and it was done. I just remember thinking like, why is my chest burning? Like I feel this constant pain, like right down my sternum. Like, the doctors just they've never treated this before. And, the internet is not your friend when it comes to medical diagnoses or reading about things like this plague. It just sets your mind buzzing. Like you don't know how much of that anecdotal stuff is worth, it's solved and how much of it is just people who are really, putting out their misery online. So I was really trying to stay away from stuff that wasn't journalistic and verified, and yet there was nowhere to get like real good, patient information. So it's just one of those things where you start to think, okay, is this going to turn into something where I get pneumonia and I have to be hospitalized and then everything goes downhill? It was a little bit, you didn't know from one day to the next. If I don't feel better tomorrow, does that mean I'm going to get sicker, or is this just, am I just in this holding pattern? So.
Well, thank God you're feeling better. I'm really glad that didn't happen.
I know. I have to say, it's nice to just wake up and be like, okay, we got to get the kids up and let's get them, the computers open and and school going, because the days of just thinking about how you physically feel, it's the most tiring thing in the world. And
speaking of your kids, was their progression different from yours? Did they feel better sooner, or get less sick, or more sick? Or
yeah, I think Elisa had the symptoms that I had, so I was definitely concerned that she and I were both, that we both had coronavirus. But she was sick maybe Friday to Tuesday. By Wednesday, I would say she started to kind of feel, better. And by Thursday, I was like, okay, you're sitting through class tomorrow morning. Like, she was, to the point that they were fighting with each other again. And it was like, okay, you're feeling good enough to fight. You're feeling good enough to sit through a couple of hours of online learning. So her progression was really Friday to maybe Wednesday. And really nothing as severe in terms of she said she lost her sense of taste and smell, which we definitely did.
Tell me about that.
Know.
What's that like?
Yeah, that's like, for someone who loves to eat as much as I do, it was, and it came on sort of subtly where I was like, oh, yeah, that's really weird. Like, I can see it's a cinnamon roll and I can put it in my mouth and I'm chewing on bread, but it was not like, you're not really getting, I kind of joke, it was like eating airplane food. It's like the only thing I could really get was salt. Like anything salty just hit my mouth like almost like it was eating like sea salt on everything. It was like, ooh, okay, that's too much. And taking a couple bites of something and being so hungry and then realizing 2 or 3 bites into it, I don't want to even eat this. Like it wasn't a nausea. It was just, it's so unappetizing. And I don't know, if they could just bottle that and I could use it periodically, I could, shed some LBs, but man, it was not fun.
Not
and
funny.
nothing tasted good. So we were even, a week later and we're sort of like, yeah, I think my taste is coming back. But it took about 7 to 8 days for both of us, maybe even a little longer, to really think, look at each other, and at dinner we'd be like, does this taste good to you? Like, can you taste anything? And, Nasha would say, yeah, kind of,
I mean, the moral of the story is I am glad to hear that to hear you sounding good, and feeling I wouldn't have known you're talking to you now. You sound like yourself, I have to say, which is great.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm feeling, like I said, it's now not feeling like a lie to say, okay, I feel good. I'm definitely keeping up my activity. I think we're getting back to the point where now I'm getting restless in a good way that says, okay, now I'm stuck home, and now I feel like, getting out, which it's a very different thing when you're stuck home and you don't feel like getting out, when you feel literally like you can't get up and can't move around. So I don't know. I definitely think this quarantine has had a different impact for people, obviously, for people who were sick during it or any part of it. I think there's a different sort of appreciation. I won't say, this is a parting thought. It's been hard to watch people not social distance, whether it's people I know or people just in general, or like the entire, southern part of the United States. It's been really weird to watch that and think, I wouldn't wish this on any of those people. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. Like, why does it take getting sick for people to understand, or God forbid, losing a relative or a loved one, to really understand the scope of this? Like, it is such a random thing that some people can completely be asymptomatic and not even know they were sick with this, and other people can die, And the good thing about a mild version is that it's going to take you probably weeks to feel better, So, and I don't think anybody has answered for me or for a lot of the people whose posts I read through the Facebook, the COVID survivors page. But it's, there's no real idea. Like, do I have any lasting heart damage from this? Are my lungs, going to be affected by this? Will I find in 20 years that I have, congestive heart failure at an earlier stage of my life because of, having been exposed to this? We just don't know. So I guess as much as I'm excited that I'm feeling better, and I'm hoping to see other people who've been sick, start to feel that same trajectory up, it's a lot of, waiting and seeing and hoping that right now that we're not setting ourselves up for a completely, the second chapter of this pandemic, which could end up, unfortunately, being a lot worse in terms of the numbers of people affected. So I don't know how this ends. We will have to wait and see.
How are you feeling looking forward to the next couple of months? That's sort of where I'm at, is trying to settle into this, realizing that.
Well, it's strange. I keep thinking this can't, I keep thinking we have to snap our fingers and get back to whatever it was we had before. And yet the part of me that wants that and wants that normalcy, the rational part of me knows that absolutely that's not going to happen. But, I want to see my friends, and I don't want to be sitting around at a picnic table, with wearing masks and having our kids wear masks at school. And yet all of those things would probably be the most logical next step forward, where you can socialize outdoors and you can have kids go back to school, whether it's all of them at once or in stages or, alternate days. But, kids are going to be spaced apart and wearing masks most likely indoors. So it's I think about what's next, and I look around and I think, I don't see people exercising good judgment now when we were in lockdown. And so I just wonder, are those rules, when you have somebody opening fire because you've been, they told you the McDonald's dining room is closed. Those are not good, omens for what the next step is. And I don't know, I don't know. It seems to be bringing out things and people that were already sort of there, but it's bringing out the worst or the most fearful. I look around and I think a lot of people are still really, really afraid. And I think I was very afraid before I got sick. And after I got sick, I think I then realized I had to deal with the actual illness, and there was no panic. It was just very pragmatic and, okay, this is what we need to do. And how many hours has it been since you took your medicine? And, okay, let's make sure let's check your temperature. And I think right now I'm seeing a lot of people still have that fear, and they've been dealing and living with it for 2 months, and not getting sick. So a lot of my friends who haven't had any, exposure to this, their idea of what will make them feel safe is very different than mine right now.
My name is David Hoffman, and this is The Big Shut-In. I produce this show, post-production by Stephen DeLardo. It's a production of Racecar Radio. If you have feedback for me, or you have a story that you think might be a good fit for the show, please do feel free to reach out. TheBigShutIn@racecarradio.com. Racecar Radio is a division of Citizen Racecar. Applied Imagination.